in the reality of many realities. How we see what we see affects the quality of our reality. We are children of earth and sky. DNA, descendant, now ancestor. Human being, physical spirit. Bone, flesh, blood as spirit. Metal, mineral, water as spirit. We are in time and space, but we're from beyond time and space. The past is part of the present. The future is part of the present. Life and being are interwoven. We are the DNA of Earth, Moon, planets, stars. We are related to the universal. Creator created creation. Spirit and intelligence with clarity. Being and human as power. We are a part of the generations of evolution. We are a part of the memories. These memories carry knowledge. These memories carry our identity. Beneath race, gender, class, age, beneath citizen, business, state, religion, we are human beings. And these memories are trying to remind us, human beings, it is time to rise up. Remember who we are.
De mi vida, amé mucho una mujer de mi alma la más querida, me traicionó la perdida, caramba, mal proceder. Ella me hizo beber, ella me hizo un perdido. A la droga me tiré, amigo mío, y a la cárcel fui llevado. Los amigos me olvidaron, solo mi madre lloraba. A Dios pedía y rogaba que se salvara su hijo. Recuerden lo que les digo, que en la prisión y en la cama solo nuestra madre nos ama, caramba. No hay dinero, no hay amigos, linda Guajira, mi son te llama.
Guajira, el son te llama a bailar, a gozar. Guajira, el son te llama a bailar, a gozar.
Greetings, greetings. Hello, 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 hello. Hope you are well today, and welcome to this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Same time, same platforms every week at this time. So, welcome today for this very important topic. Every topic we do is very important, but this one today, we're going to be talking about the unknown contributions of European white accomplice Marilyn Buck. And this one is important topic because we have a lot of very important people who have contributed to. Give me just a second. Hold on just a second. Apologies for that. Least interruptions. Anyway, we have a lot of people who have contributed to our struggle. A lot of them are not African, and most people know the name Assata Shakur, but if it were not for the contributions of brave and courageous people like Sekou Odinga and Matulu Shakur and multiple white accomplices, Sarah Balinini and Marilyn Buck, you probably wouldn't know who Assata Shakur is today. So we owe a debt. So we're happy to be able to share this particular comrade's contributions. She's a woman who myself and Shakur knew personally. We visited her in prison multiple times, several times, and had a really strong relationship with her. So always honored to talk about Auntie Marilyn Buck. And that's what we'll be doing today. And we give honor to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, of course, whose lands these belong to. We give honor to our African ancestors. Um, Feeling some fatigue today, had a full day yesterday, like 8 or 9 hours of work that was designed to. There are a number of young people who are engaged in protest activities, organizing activities, and experience being attacked by adults. I mean, this is despicable behavior, but this is the society we live in. Racist and homophobic adults who wanted to attack them because they didn't agree with the message the youth were articulating. So the youth want to be better prepared. So they reached out and started working with them, and we'll continue to do that. But it's a lot of work. It's that's how my weekends are spent, and I wouldn't have it any other way because I slept so good last night, and I can sleep so well because I know that at least to the extent of my psychological and physical capabilities, I'm doing the best I can on a consistent basis to challenge this beast. And I encourage you to try it because it'll help you feel the same way. So we're glad that you're here, and we'll start as we always do, just by brief introductions of who we are and what we're doing here. Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. As I said, AAPRP, and the APRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass, Pan-African political party with its base in Africa. Africa is on fire, you all. I mean, we have to say that over and over again because if you live, especially in this cesspool, there's nothing ever talked about regarding Africa. So, that saying out of sight, out of mind, you don't think about it. And as a result, you erroneously believe that nothing is really happening there. But the reason why they don't talk about it is because everything is happening there. So we are engaged in this fight to achieve Pan-Africanism, which is our objective. The definition of Pan-Africanism for us being one unified socialist Africa, which we believe is the solution we are striving for. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism, it's outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, which is a book that you have to read collectively with other AAPRP folks when you are a member of the AAPRP. And we encourage everyone inside and outside our organization to read this book, especially if you want to understand what Pan-African work is doing, what it's designed to do, what its objective is, how it is implemented, all of those things. And we take the work that we do today straight out of that book. And our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and my biological, ideological offspring, Dr. Shakura Umi. So to get us started talking about our wonderful ancestor, comrade Marilyn Buck, I'll turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Yes, yes. Greetings, everyone. I'm so excited to talk about Auntie Marilyn. Really, really thankful that this was a priority for my parents to introduce me to her at such a young age, because I think when we are limited with the information we have, not only does that impact our growth as adults, but it also impacts our growth in terms of how we can expose our children. Just like you heard me say with my Cuban report backs, this is why it's important for us to have more conversations about learning and researching what socialism truly is and how it actually goes against a lot of the propaganda, all of it actually. The actual idea of it goes against a lot of the propaganda that exists. Well, I would say it's the same argument for Africans who are comfortable saying that, Europeans have never done anything for them. I was at an event yesterday for the party, and the African comrade, she meant well, but she was not in an organization that was working for justice. And even though she had done her own individual work researching about Palestine, we did have a comrade there. Shout out to the Arab Resource Organizing Center for supporting us yesterday at our event. But we did have a comrade there representing AROC, Arab Resource Organizing Center. And the African comrade said, after the comrade spoke from Palestine, the African comrade said, we need to do more because, people in Palestine don't care about Black people in Oakland. And I was like, how can you say something like that and have no evidence to support what you're saying? Like, how can you say that with confidence and with security and with like stability? How can you say that? especially if we're inviting her to speak at our event. That should tell you something right there. But it didn't. It didn't click for this person. So my comrade from Palestine was like, oh, and I was like, it's okay. It's okay. You can answer that how you want to. I said, but I would just like to respond, as a member of this organization and tell you that their struggle is our struggle. This is why they're here. And I would argue it's the same for Africans saying that Europeans haven't done anything. Obviously, we know that that is not true. B, it's very dangerous to put out very large mistruths like that when you don't have the evidence to support it. And more importantly, this is not our first time doing a seminar on Auntie Marilyn. So in addition to us thinking about other Europeans who have sacrificed and put their lives on the line, there have been countless examples of that. And then when you don't go through the steps to actually honor those folks and to research them and to understand how they played a role, how they played a part, not only are you a danger to society, but you're a danger to your self-development. And that just means that you're okay with being ignorant, and we don't have a lot of space for that. Personally speaking, like, we don't have a lot of space for that. We need people who are open and willing to grow. That's the only way this is going to work, because the bottom line is everything that you've been taught is a lie. Everything that you've been taught is a lie. Accept that right now. Everything that you have been taught, especially if you were educated within the United States of America, it's been a lie. It has not been designed to be based on truth, humanity, or justice. So because you know that it is a lie, you need to assume responsibility that you now have some re-educating that you need to do for yourself and for your family and for your society, your neighborhood, or whoever else is impacted by your decisions based on the knowledge that you have access to. One of my favorite quotes by Kwame Nkrumah. He says, the degree of a country's political education can best be measured by the education of its women. And in that regard, obviously, he was saying that women hold the key to impacting the family and more so societies and structure creations. But I would still make the argument he's also still saying that we have ownership to seek that political education that we are not getting. And so let's talk more about Auntie Marilyn. Again, as I said, for the second time, if not more. I think we've done at least 2 seminars on her, not including this one. But let's talk more about this, because it's important to have this conversation, and it's important to understand just how much she sacrificed so that we could even know who Assata Shakur was. Just how much Auntie Marilyn sacrificed. That is more important than you will ever know, for us to talk about her right now and honor her and to thank her for what she did, not only for Assata's revolution, but also for the African revolution in general, in terms of it evolving and growing. Because she put her life on the line, we were able to learn more about Assata when she got to Cuba. We were able to learn more about how vicious the FBI and the American government was in terms of framing her and setting her up, putting the bounty on her. It's because of Auntie Marilyn that Assata survived, and we were able to understand just how corrupt this government was in terms of trying to kill her. So we need to very much give honor to Auntie Marilyn. Our struggle for the African liberation is one for us to understand that in order for us to achieve a Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa, that is what we are fighting for as this organization that is hosting this seminar now. We want all of Africa to be one unified socialist Africa. That's what we want. And our struggle is focused around organizing African people worldwide. This is why we have an organization that is based out of Africa, but we also have chapters in the US that is considered one chapter in the Western Hemisphere. We have a chapter in Canada. We have chapters in Europe. This is what this is all about, you all. We are trying to do the work because, unfortunately, we understand that Africans are everywhere. So we need to organize Africans everywhere, and we need to be accessible so that Africans can organize with us everywhere. We have zero compromise around this principle, but that doesn't mean that we don't have people, even European people, who have always been willing to step up to support our struggle. This is why it's so important for you all to join our institutions that we celebrate each year. So as you know, May will be African Liberation Day. We have that coming up. And we always talk about how we're so proud of our relationships with the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or the Palestinian Youth Movement. We also have speakers from the Haiti Action Committee. We have speakers from the Arab Resource Organizing Center. We have speakers from Black Alliance for Peace. And when I was a younger child, not the last couple of years, but when I was a younger child up until my teens, we always had a speaker from the socialist Irish Socialist Party. So my point is, like, that's on purpose because of the connections and the relationships that we have managed. We also have asked other people who are not African to come to African Liberation Day because their struggle is very similar and very aligned to our struggle. And the sooner that we realize that, the sooner that we realize that we should show up for them and support them, and we hope that they will show up for us and support us, the faster we will be at accomplishing our goals. We don't want people in Ireland to be oppressed and colonized by the British any more than they want us to be colonized and oppressed by the British or the French or the Portuguese, and so on and so forth. So this idea about having European people who have been willing to step up, that's not a new concept. And as I said, if you don't take the time to do the research, you are a danger to society. More dangerous than you being violent, you are dangerously ideologically misrepresenting the truth. And therefore, you are no different from the federal government. That is the fact. We need to research this stuff so we know what we're talking about. Even with the great sacrifice in themselves, you have Europeans that have allowed, in many ways, for our people to do the things that some of us weren't even willing to do. And it's because those Europeans sacrificed themselves. Marilyn Buck, Auntie Marilyn, was a European who met that description, very much so met that description. And I would just say, very much had a lot to lose and still chose to put her own personal comfort aside because she believed in a greater possibility of a greater world, and she wanted very much to contribute to making that happen. Next slide, please. I talk all the time when I'm invited to speak in different spaces about privilege and the fact that all of us have privilege, right? It's not our fault that we have privilege, but the question, my friends, is what are you willing to do with the privilege? More importantly, what are you willing to risk? Because everyone has privilege, but how are you willing to use your privilege to enable another person's situation or outcome who probably does not have as much as you? Auntie Marilyn was a shining example of that very action that I just proposed. She very much used her privilege, not once, not twice, numerous times, where she was able to use her privilege to sacrifice because she knew that she had more afforded to her than other people. And because of that, that to me is a true ally. Who is Auntie Marilyn Buck? Well, let's talk about it. Born in Texas, Marilyn was born in 1947. Her parents were opposed to racist segregation laws that existed throughout the U.S. South, including Texas, and the activism of the Buck family led to the Ku Klux Klan, KKK, burning crosses at their residence in Temple, Texas. And you all already know, if the KKK is burning crosses near your residence, then that should tell you what side of truth she was on, what side of truth her family was on. This consciousness led Marilyn to develop as a student activist at the University of California, Berkeley. She became an active member of Students for a Democratic Society, also known as SDS, increasing her anti Vietnam War and anti racism activism. We always talk about the importance of being in an organization. Marilyn Buck was in the organization Students for a Democratic Society, just making that plug so you all can see how it's all connected. She was responsible for writing the paper on anti-patriarchy in the SDS, which contributed towards the political spirit in that organization that produced the Weathermen, or eventually the Weather Underground, which was a more radical group of young European white activists that aligned with the African liberation struggle. So again, when we talk about Europeans who haven't done anything for Africans, there is a clear illustration of the Weather Underground, which was an organization designed for radical European white activists to align with the African liberation struggle. So this is why it's important to know your political education. Maryland became a part of this formation. And as I prepare to close, I just want to say that I continue to be so grateful for people like Auntie Marilyn, people like Anime Pictoire Aquash, because even though those folks are not African, they are a part of my legacy, and they very much have contributed to how my values as an African woman have been designed. What it means to think about the humanity of other people and to risk everything to ensure a better world for those to come. Ashe.
Ashe Ngozi, Asante Sana, Medasi, Obrigada. Thank you very much. And before we go on with, going even deeper into the work and contributions of Marilyn Buck, I just want to talk about the Weather Underground for a second. They were, as Shakur mentioned, they were an organization that came out of SDS. There was a political split in SDS. There were radical elements within SDS, of which Marilyn was a part of. And then there were other elements that represented different tendencies, people that went on to pursue electoral offices. People like Tom Hayden, for example, were examples of that. And so the more radical folks emerged into the group called the Weathermen. And because of their activities, they were forced underground, and that's why they their name changed to the Weather Underground. They took the name Weather from a song by Bob Dylan that talks about, how the weather changes as a, kind of like a pseudonym for the changing of the times, right? And what was that activism? The activism was they would, the Weather Underground would go and whenever there was an African youth shot by the police, of course, this happens like the sun comes up every morning in this backward country. Whenever that would happen, the Weather Underground folks would go to that to a police outlet in the town where that happened. One of the smaller ones they would choose where no one would be there at night. Because the smaller police stations, they're not necessarily always 24/7. So they would find those locations or the closest one like that, and they would plant a bomb and they would explode the bomb. And then they would send a communique. We didn't have internet in the 1960s and early 70s. So they would send a communique, which was basically a wire or a telegram. And in that, they would explain that we blew up this police department because the police are agents of imperialism and they're killing, the African masses. And they would do that repeatedly. And it really was something that helped bring attention to police terrorism against African people. Of course, because the Weather Underground was a European group, they received a large extent of press coverage, and that helped folks become aware of this problem outside of the African community. So Marilyn Buck, of course, was a critical part of the Weather Underground in those early days of the late 60s and the early 70s, 1969 into the early 70s, we'll say. And so let's talk about once we got into the 1970s, some of Marilyn's specific political work. Right here in the picture on the screen, if you're looking at it, hopefully you are, it's a picture of Marilyn disguised, right? Because there's a reason why she had to wear disguises, and we'll talk about that shortly. So, we talked about the change in the name. Marilyn desired a higher level of participation in the struggle for African liberation. She saw that struggle as the pinnacle of how change would take place in this backward society. So she did quite a bit of work to make herself available to supporting the movements and struggles within the African community, the most radical struggles in the African community. And one of those was taking place with a group that was called the Black Liberation Army, or the BLA. Now, the BLA was uh, emerged out of the underground, and there's a lot of confusion. I've done quite a bit of research on it, and of course, talking to folks who were involved in that movement, people who spent a lot of time in prison, of course, because of their participation in the BLA as well as in the Black Panther Party. But the underground of that emerged into the BLA, was in existence before uh, the counterintelligence program of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, pushed the Black Panther Party underground. There was already an underground that was existing, right? Before that, when the Black Panther Party was above ground, doing the work they did with their social programs and all the things they were doing, they still had the underground because there were always people who were getting arrested, who were being set up by the state. And so they have to have a mechanism to ensure the safety of those folks. In fact, one of the folks who was targeted by COINTELPRO, Geronimo G. Jago, who was known as Geronimo Pratt in Los Angeles, was a Vietnam vet who one of his responsibilities was helping coordinate the underground. And this was, in 1968, before when the Black Panther Party was, still very much above ground. So that's important to understand. Like the underground was there, but as COINTELPRO intensified, right? And we're talking about the period of 1969, 1970, where the police were engaging in coordinated activities on a nationwide basis to set up the Black Panther Party, discredit the Black Panther Party, murder its leaders, and imprison the ones that they didn't murder. And the way they did that, and the order they did it, is that they would engage in what they call black bag jobs. And those were occasions where they would break into the living quarters of Black Panther Party members and plant illegal evidence, and then come back and find the evidence with warrants and arrest the people and get people on these types of trumped up charges. They were able to do this to Bobby Seale around the murder of Alex Rackley in Connecticut and Erica Huggins behind the same situation. And they were able to, essentially accuse both of them because of each of their position as leaders within the national leaders within the Black Panther Party. They were able to, frame them and keep them tied up in court. Some of the people ended up going to prison, like Geronimo G. Jago for 27 years, and a number of Black Panthers that happened to, but others may not have gotten long prison sentences. That didn't happen with Bobby Seale or Erica Huggins, but they were held up in court for so long that it drained the financial resources of the Black Panther Party, and it focused all of their attention on liberating these people. In fact, the one of the prime criticisms of the Black Panther Party that came from people who were involved in the organization and ended up leaving it, people like Kwame Ture, for example, was that the Panthers fell into this trap I just described. When Huey Newton was arrested for the shootout where the cop in Oakland, John Frey, was killed, of course, Huey was in jail for almost 4 years there, and the Black Panther Party's primary program for much of that period, you could argue that it was the social programs, but certainly right up there with that was the Free Huey campaign. That was one of the main slogans the Panthers had, Free Huey. And they had organizations that were specifically designed not to build revolutionary work, but to get Huey out of prison. Like they had an organization in the Bay Area called Honkies for Huey that was European people, that was actually led by this guy, Bob Avakian, who went on to become the leader of the Revolutionary Communist Party, RCP. So a lot of resources were tied up in, these folks tied up in the judicial system in capitalist America. And, this again was one of the criticisms that was waged against the Black Panther Party. But there were this selection of folks who were underground, who were calling themselves the Black Liberation Army. And they decided to engage in activities that were designed to attack the state and acquire resources for revolutionary work. Now, one of the things that the BLA wanted to do, if you study their literature, is they wanted to inspire the African masses to become revolutionary in their consciousness. But it's very difficult to do that when you're underground because you can't engage with people on a day-to-day basis. You're running from law enforcement agencies. You can't do that. So it becomes very difficult. A revolutionary party that's serious has to be a propaganda party, meaning that its initial and primary responsibility is to consistently provide propaganda and education to the people that raises the revolutionary consciousness. And you can't do that underground. So that was one of the shortcomings. But the BLA had this program, and they were engaged in what they call appropriation activities. And what these activities were is they would rob banks, they would rob armored car vehicles, and they would use the funds to finance a lot of the organizing work that was happening within the inner cities in this country. And that's well documented. A lot of the work, for example, the work Matulu Shakur was a practitioner of acupuncture, and there were clinics that were open. And where do you think a lot of that money came from? This is not anything to be ashamed of. This is a good thing. All of these goddamn banks started from seed money that was supplied by the enslavement of our African ancestors. So I don't give a damn if Wells Fargo and B of A are robbed. The only problem I have with people that are doing that is they just do it for selfish gain, to try to gain some money for themselves. But the BLA was not doing that. They were doing it to it was reparations, really. That's a legitimate form of reparations, not getting money and getting checks to people who have done absolutely zero to contribute to our liberation struggle. That's not reparations. What they did was closer to the real reparations has to center Africa. If it's not centering, because that's where the problem started. So if it's not centering Africa, it's not really a serious discussion we're having about reparations. If we're just talking about giving any random person that hasn't done a goddamn thing to liberate our people a check, that's not a serious discussion. But the BLA was at least a much higher level than that, because they were using the money they were obtaining from these appropriation exercises to contribute to the struggle to uplift the African community. And so that's admirable. We don't give a damn if you don't think it's admirable. We think it's very admirable, and we respect them for that. But we don't have the same morality and the same standards, because the same people who would call the BLA thugs and criminals are the same people that support the U.S. government, which is the biggest thug and criminal in human history. So the U.S. military, which is the biggest terrorist organization in world history. So not U.S. history, world history. So you don't have any credibility. We're not listening to you if you believe that. You expose yourself as just an unserious person, an ignorant person, a dumbass, a person who says and does whatever they do just so they can feel better about what their miserable life has produced, which is nothing. Because if a lot of what white supremacy relies on is supplying the masses of white people a feeling that your life is miserable. We understand as a system, we kick your worthless ass every day, but at least you're not African. That's what white supremacy depends upon. So we know, we understand what that's going on. We don't listen to you. You have nothing to contribute to us. We don't even need you for anything. So we admire the Black Liberation Army, even though we have our critiques, because we're revolutionaries. We struggle based on science, not just sentiment. So we have to make critiques. And when we're dead and gone, the people will hopefully make critical critiques against our work, because this is how we get better. And if we get better, that's how we improve our ability to be successful with our work. So Marilyn Buck, of course, had connections and relationships with a lot of these people who are involved in this underground BLA work, this appropriation work. So she made herself available, as I mentioned, and she began to support that work. And she had to convince the people in the BLA units that she could be useful, because they looked at her, they knew each other. They looked at her and they saw her as someone who was a European, and they were apprehensive about bringing her into the ranks, and a couple of other Europeans that came in to help them. And plus, Marilyn was arrested in 1973 behind some appropriation work supporting the BLA, and she walked away from prison in the early mid 80s. And so there was hesitation about that, because she was, of course, hunted and searched for. But she was able to convince respected people like Sekou Ndinga, very much deserves that respect. An honorable warrior, fearless warrior, very much deserves that respect. She was able to convince comrade brother Sekou Touré and I'm sorry, Sekou Odinga, ancestor Sekou Odinga, that it could be beneficial to have people like her because the system would never be looking for a young white woman when they were searching for African revolutionaries. And based on her consistency, they eventually began to permit her to start working with them. And she was involved in several of their appropriation exercises. Now, one of the most unfortunate exercises in that realm was the Brinks truck robbery in 1981. And you can Google that. All you got to do is Google the Brinks truck robbery. It was all over the national news when it happened in 1981. And the reason why that was considered such a big event is in 1973, the FBI officially reported that they had destroyed the Black Liberation Army. They had arrested Assata Shakur and shot her and arrested her after the shootout on the New Jersey Turnpike, and they saw Sister Assata as the leader of the BLA. She never once described herself as the leader of the BLA. This is the capitalist system that said that, and a lot of you parrot that. She didn't say that. She never once said that. I spent 5 days with her when I was in Cuba in 1994. She didn't talk like that at all. So you shouldn't talk like that because the only place I've ever heard that was from the capitalist system. But they said that, and so they arrested her. They had her a few days after that shootout. They got Brother Sundiata Acoli, who was Clark Squires then, and so they had them. They had raided several locations where BLA members were, primarily in the New York City area. And after they viciously and brutally machine gunned 21-year-old Twyman Myers down on the Brooklyn street in 1973, they announced that they had effectively destroyed the Black Liberation Army. So imagine their shock in 1981, 8 years later, after they said the BLA was no more. Imagine their shock when this Brinks truck that was robbed for over $1.5 million. And unfortunately, that activity had a lot of problems. And the problems that were around the organization or disorganization of that activity led to a lot of our liberation fighters being identified, incarcerated, and basically spending the rest of their lives in prison. And what happened is that a lot of the people, some of the people who were recruited to work on that Brinks robbery were not people who were stable-minded people. There was one man by the name of Samuel Brown, and there were a lot of questions about his stability. And if you watch a lot of these crime movies, like there's a great crime movie called Heat from 1995, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, uh, McKelty Williamson, Val Kilmer, Michael Sizemore. Very, very good movie. I love that movie. But in that movie, they had Danny Trejo was in it, and there was one of the instances where I think it was Danny Trejo was not able to participate with them, so they pulled in this other redneck dude, and one of the guards for the armored truck twitched, and he shot him and killed him. And it was an extreme breach of discipline because the crime crew that Robert De Niro led, they were highly disciplined. And so that's pretty much what happened with the Brinks robbery in 1981 in real life. Like this Samuel Brown person and one other person engaged in what was reported as cowboy activities by people who were involved. And as a result, I can't remember if it was two police and one security guard for the truck, or uh, one cop and two security guards, but three people were killed in that shootout, and a lot of evidence was left behind, and a lot of people were involved in that. And the thing about that, I mentioned Sekou Odinga was a very disciplined soldier, and when these people talked about the plan, and he had been involved in appropriations work, but when these people talked about the plan for this Brinks truck in 1981, he was dead set against the idea and didn't want to do it, and you know dismissed himself from participating with that. Unfortunately, there were other people that the state did connect to that Brinks truck robbery, and two of those people were Matulu Shakur and Marilyn Buck. And the way they linked Marilyn Buck to it is one of the vehicles that was used was rented under a pseudonym name of Karen Durant that they connected to Marilyn Buck. And so that's how they were able to identify her and charge her with that crime. Okay, so let's talk about again in 1973. I mentioned this. Maryland received a 10-year sentence for possessing guns that were linked to these BLA appropriations actions. They you know what they do, they go back and search, they recover a gun, they go back and search where it was purchased, and they can find out who actually purchased it. And that in and of itself makes you what they call a person of interest. And then they find other circumstantial evidence and go through whatever these capitalist Gestapos do, and then they eventually get enough of this information together so that they could get a warrant and come after you. And so that's what happened. And so Marilyn received this 10-year sentence. Um, and in regards to the Brinks truck robbery, after she escaped prison after that initial sentence, the Brinks robbery happened, and she was charged along with Sekou Odinga. They, charged him because of his relationship to him, Matulu Shakur and others, with robbery, accomplice to murder, and racketeering in relation to the Brinks robbery. And that's what happened. But while that was happening, um, Marilyn was able to. There were a few years where she was able to step away from her prison. We'll just put it like that. In the mid '80s, and in doing that, she was able. I'm sorry. Let me back up. As I mentioned, she was able to get out of prison based on the 1973 conviction. And when it came around to the time when Assata Shakur was rescued out of prison, which was November of 1979, that did not happen spontaneously. That was a collection of people. Maryland was a part of that, along with Sekou Odinga and others. And they planned that out. And they planned having Maryland be one of these distraction people that she talked to them like, I could be that, I could do that. And that was one of the things that helped them get away with Assata Shakur, is having these Europeans helping them. But they actually, as we've talked about in the other workshops we've done around the Black Liberation Army, and I know we did one on Sekou Odinga as well, we talked about his meticulous planning and how they started planning almost up to a year before November 2nd, 1979. He literally drove a van into the prison, um, pretending to go there as a delivery person, and then another time pretending to go there to visit someone, just to be able to determine what they would have access to, what the escape routes were, how much people were paying attention when they drove the van, and all these things. They meticulously planned this. That's why they were successful with getting Assata out of prison. They didn't just break into prison and say, hey, does somebody know Assata Shakur? Tell her we're out here and we're ready to take her out of this prison. She knew. They communicated with her. They had code language. She knew they were coming. She knew exactly when they were coming. And she knew where to be so that they could get her out. This is why we talk about organization so often, because a lot of folks are not engaged in organization. You don't participate in organization. You don't respect organization. You think everything just happens because people have an idea and they carry it out. So you think Assata got rescued from prison because she was just sitting there and something happened spontaneously, and she was just able to walk out while there was clouds or dust or something. I don't know what you think, but this didn't happen that way. It happened through intense, consistent organization. And I can tell you that comrade ancestor brother Sekou Odinga would have not had it any other way. And when I went to visit Marilyn Buck all the time, we talked about that endlessly. She had a tremendous amount of respect for comrade ancestor Sekou Odinga, and she talked about, I would ask her nothing about what they did, but I would ask her just, to tell me about him, because I've known about him since I was about 16 years old. And I finally got a chance to meet him in 2018 in Oakland when he was um, doing a tour for his book. And I sat there and cried in front of him and told him, I've known you my whole life. I know you don't know me. I'm just somebody in a audience at a bookstore, but you've had an inspiration to me my whole life. I've talked about you. My daughter, she look at me like, I don't know any. Why are you telling me about this person? But I would talk to her about all these people, and we didn't get a chance to meet all of them, but I did get a chance to take her on a number of occasions to visit Marilyn Buck. She was in prison just about an hour and a half from where we live here in the Federal Women's Facility in Dublin, California. So once I was in Cuba and met Assata, once she realized where I lived, she's like, Marilyn Buck is right down the road. Now, I very much knew who Marilyn Buck was by the time I went to Cuba in 1994, but I didn't know she was an hour and a half from me. So the minute I came back, I wrote her. She wrote me back immediately. And I don't know, between that time, which was 1994, and 2010, when she made her physical transition, I probably visited her like 8 or 9 times at least. And like I mentioned, Shakur went a couple of times, and I would constantly talk to her. I'd stay there all day. I'd stay there like 6, 7 hours. And they wouldn't let you bring food. You couldn't order food. All you could do, they had vending machines. So I felt so bad. I would always make sure I had change so that that's all I could do is buy her something to eat. They never let you bring cameras in there. So I couldn't take a picture of her or anything like that. I could just go in there and talk to her. But, her lawyer, she talked to her lawyer about me because we ended up doing some work in the Dublin prison. And so her lawyer is still here, Marilyn's lawyer, and her lawyer, I never met her lawyer, but came across her and she was like, yeah, I know Marilyn used to talk about you. And I'm like, she did, because I mean, these are people I just admire and look up to. And so that was real humbling for me. But she was involved, Marilyn was, in this Brinks robbery. And as a result of that, she was on the run again. And of course, during Marilyn's incarceration in 1973, she briefly met Assata, but she didn't really know her. I mean, that's important to say that. She didn't really know that. Now, when I started visiting Marilyn in 1994, I thought, they were comrades, they were in prison together. I didn't research it. I just assumed that. And as soon as I went to visit her, she made it clear to me, like, no, I don't really know it. Like, you spent 5 days with her, you know her better than I do. She said that to me. Like, and I didn't know what to say because I'm like, this woman is in prison for helping this woman escape. And she didn't even really know her. She did that because she understood the importance of making that kind of contribution. And what was the importance of making that contribution? The importance was, in the course of carrying out all of those appropriation activities, Sekou Odinga, Mutulu Shakur, the other people who were involved, uh, Brother Balagoon, all of those people that were involved, Sister Nehanda, who was living in Cuba, they were communicating. And they talked about, they wanted to achieve their initial mission, which was to inspire the African masses with revolutionary consciousness. And they didn't feel that the appropriations work, the bank robberies, all those things was accomplishing that. Because when those things would happen, all that would result from that is the news media labeling them as terrorists and, dangerous and all of these types of things. And of course, no one knew where the money was going. Of course, the capitalist media would make it look like they were just robbing banks to rob banks, like everybody else that robs banks. So they weren't accomplishing that objective of achieving the revolutionary consciousness. So they wanted to do something else that would help them accomplish that. And in thinking about that, they decided a good course of action would be to break Assata Shakur out of prison. And so that's how that all came about. All the planning, all of the focus, the recruitment of the people who would be involved in it. And that's how that happened. And of course, they were correct, because in breaking Assata out of prison, what that did is demonstrate to the entire world that the U.S. can be defeated. That's the inspiration behind Assata Shakur. Most of the people who wear the Assata taught me all, they don't even really understand what specific role Assata Shakur played. All they know is that she beat the capitalist system. That's what they know. And I was having a meeting the day that Assata made a couple of days after she made her physical transition back in September of 2025. And the word was out. And I was meeting with youth. It was a group of youth, African youth, European youth, indigenous youth, Asian youth. And we were doing some training. And we were sitting there talking. And the young European woman, I asked her, so what do you know about Sister Assata? Because these youth, they had seen the interview I did with Assata that's on YouTube. And so they wanted to ask me about her. And I told them, everything. And then they were like, I asked her, well, what did you know about her? And, this young woman's in her 20s, right? Assata Shakur has been in Cuba almost twice as long as she's been alive. And she said, her words to me is that she beat the beast. She died in peace. And I'm like, that's significant. I'm sure that if I was sitting here right now with Sekou Odinga, Matulu Shakur, Marilyn Buck, and all the people involved in this, they would say that that's exactly what they wanted to accomplish. They wanted people to recognize that this country's not infallible. They can be defeated. You can walk into their prisons right through the front door, and you can disengage them. You can defeat them. They wanted to do that, and they did accomplish that. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's the reason why they pursued Assata Shakur so hard. In 2014, this woman was in her 60s, and she is in Cuba. She hadn't been involved in political activity for 40 years, right? And the Obama administration, they went down there, met with Raul Castro, and talking about we'll consider lifting this crippling economic embargo. This is why they don't have electricity in Cuba today, because of this crippling economic embargo. That's why they said, if you just give us Assata Shakur, they call her Joanna Chesmer. They're never going to recognize our, free names. If you just give us Joanna Chesmer, we'll talk about lifting some of these restrictions. And the Cuban people, always operating under integrity, said Raul Castro's words to her were, that's not on the table, quote unquote. That is not on the, Assata is not on the table. He didn't call her Joanna Chesmart. He called her by her name, her free African name. Assata is not on the table. And that was the end of that. But that's why they wanted her so badly, because her escaping their grasp is an inspiration to you that you can do the same thing. And they don't want you to believe that. They want you to be afraid of them. They want you to believe that they're all powerful, that there's nothing you can do to impact anything they're doing. The only thing you can do, they want you to believe this, is get high, get drunk, and just try to have as much fun as you can have and not really think too much about this serious political stuff, because there's nothing you can do anyway. That's what they want you to believe. And a lot of you believe that. They don't want you to be inspired by the example of Assata Shakur. But I'm here to tell you that those revolutionaries sacrificed their lives. Comrade Sekou, Comrade Matulu, Comrade Marilyn, all of them spent over 3 decades in prison behind this work that they were engaged in. Partly the Brinks robberies and other things, but primarily their roles in helping Assata Shakur escape. That's a fact. They had formed a group called the May 19th Communist Organization, which was former Weather Underground people like Maryland, Black Liberation Army people, and those are the folks who plotted to get Assata out of prison. They came back and they arrested Marilyn. She was convicted, found in the underground, convicted based on having 2 boxes of bullets. And because the vehicles used in connection with Assata's escape and the 1981 Brinks trucks robbery were rented by her under that name, Carol Durant. I think I said Karen. Carol Durant was the alias that she was using. And so that's how they were able to get her in prison, where she spent 33 years. So Marilyn's legacy it should be stated that she did sin the 33 plus years, and she was released in 2010. She had cancer, and I visited her in 2010. I wasn't even living in California at that time, and I came down here and I made arrangements and I visited her, and she didn't tell me she was sick like that. And you know, she just told me she wasn't feeling well, but she didn't tell me she had cancer. And I know Marilyn well enough to know that she didn't tell me that because she didn't, she was the type of person, she didn't want you to worry about her. She, every time I would talk to her, write to her, visit her, every time she would always like, I'm fine, don't worry about me, just keep doing the work. She would say that and there's no way I saw the condition she was in. There was no way she was ever fine. But that's the kind of person she was. And I have I feel a lot of guilt. I wish I would have known. I mean, it's nothing I could do, but I just wish I could have known just so I could have let her know, I feel like I let her know what she meant to me, but I don't know. You know how trauma is. That's how that works. But it's important to understand though that she's she had opportunities. She had parole hearings a number of times. And what they wanted from her was for her to tell them all the people that were involved in helping Assata escape. Like that was really big, very important to them to get that information for the reasons I described. And she, of course, never told them that. And a lot of those people were still alive while this was happening. Comrade Brother Sekou was alive. They had gotten him for some other things. Brother Balagoon was alive at that time. And so it wasn't something that anybody who was seriously committed to the struggle like Marilyn was going to ever say to them. So she sacrificed herself, right? And this is the ultimate example of selflessness, right? And we're not even asking anybody today to do what Marilyn. You don't have the character to do what Marilyn did. We're not asking you to do that. We're just asking you to do something on a consistent basis to honor that legacy, because her impact in dedicating her life and sacrificing for our struggle is still largely unknown by our people and even Europeans. There's a recently released book that is designed to throw shade at the African liberation movement. And I'm going to name it I have to get it. Hold on. I'll get it. I can't find it right now, but it's called "Break the Burrow," and what it's about. This mediocre European man, but you should read everything. That's why I'm telling you the title. I read it, and what he's doing is saying that the Africans in the BLA used Marilyn to get what they wanted, and they never even acknowledged her. These people were in prison when Marilyn died. Well, what were they supposed to do? They didn't have any resources to help her. That wasn't what it was based on. I knew me. He didn't know Marilyn. He was just writing about her. I knew Marilyn Buck. She wasn't concerned about that. That's just some cracker that wrote a book and is angry at Africa. They probably beat his ass in school, something like that. So he's angry at us. So this is why he's writing this book and saying that, and he's talking about it, right? That they disrespected Marilyn. I'm gonna tell you, she never believed that. She understood why she did what she did, and she never once felt any feeling like she should have gotten something for this. This is not how people who are dedicated to forward human progress think. They don't think like that. All the sacrifices of the Cuban Revolution, they don't think like that. Me spending all my weekend doing political work, exhausted, have to go to slavery again tomorrow. I don't think like that. I'm honored to be able to make a contribution. The only people that think like that are people that aren't going to do anything anyway. So we thank you for joining us. We invite you back next week, same time, same platforms. A necessary recognition to International Women's Day month. Shakur is going to be primarily giving you a wonderful presentation. So please don't say, well, it's about women, I don't have to go. No, that should mean that you more so prioritize going. That's what that should mean. So come on out, the red and white blue QR code, scan that at the upper left and see all the APRP programs. Order something from the Forward Ever shop, Revolutionary Clothing, do that. And then if you're in the Sacramento area, we have self-defense, community self-defense every Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. our time, 2775 Cottage Way, like cottage cheese, Unit 15, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15. Come on out. You don't have to register or anything like that, bureaucratic. Just come out and be prepared to exercise your mind and body, and you'll have a great time. And then also keep on your calendar Monday, April 6th. I'm going to be doing a complete report back on our organizing work in Azania, South Africa in January of this year, 2026. We're going to be talking about 3 essential questions during that report back. What do people in Africa think about Africans in the US? Because there's so much confusion around this today. So, as someone who is in Africa all the time, I want to dedicate some time to talking about that because the people who are talking about it don't even hardly know how to spell Africa. The people they don't even like us in Africa, can't even spell it. So goddamn stupid. So if you really want to get some quality analysis around this question, come to this report back on April 6th. And if you can't come, tell people who can so that they can come and get the information. That's the first question. The second question is about the apartheid system. Did it end in 1994? I say that it didn't, and I'll be explaining at the report back why I'm saying that. And then the last question is, what is this work these people keep talking about, this Pan-African work? What does it look like on the ground? Well, since I do it every time I go to Africa, I'm going to explain to you what it looks like so you can know what Pan-Africanist work looks like. So come on out April 6th, Monday, 6 to 8 p.m., same location as the self-defense classes, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15. We'll have food as well. You should join the APRP, aprp-intl.org. The QR code on the bottom right, black and white one. Support our organizing work in the Sahel region, Burkina Faso, and Niger. We're bringing in revolutionary literature so we can organize work study circles and build the African Revolution there. So become a monthly sponsor and support my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. It's only $8. There's a QR code next to that. Please buy it. Support our work. If you've already bought it, get people to do a book club so you can read it together. It's a great organizing book, if I do say so myself. If you don't believe me, talk to the dozens of people who've written reviews about it when you scan the QR code, and they will tell you. I don't know them. So they have no motivation, incentive to say it just because of me. They said it because it's a good book. So check it out. And ask your local library to order it. Ask your local bookstore to order it. And then 100% of the proceeds go towards all this work that we do. So help us do it. Forward ever, backwards never. Enjoy the rest of your day.